Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. We're back after a little bit of a forced break as, well, construction in the office took a little longer than expected and I'm still not actually in there. Thankfully, however, during that time I've been thinking a lot about Warhammer The Old World for two reasons, mainly because one, there is a lot of issues in Warhammer in general when it comes to rules and so on. And two, well, the most important thing is that a large majority of us are very excited for this new age of Warhammer Fantasy, and many of us have big expectations. So the purpose of this video is kinda like an open letter to Games Workshop in a sense. So this video is what I believe that Warhammer The Old World really needs to be truly successful. Keep in mind that my experiences as a long-standing Warhammer Fantasy player, not just for fluff games but also very competitively, is coming into account in this. I'm not saying I know better than anyone else, but I have been playing Warhammer Fantasy competitively since I was about 13, so that's about 16 years of my life. It's a lot of time spent there building up lists and thankfully winning quite a decent amount of tournaments. So without further ado, let's begin. First, let's talk about miniatures and Forge World, because, well, we pretty much know at this point that Warhammer The Old World is going to feature on Forge World, as the previous interviews that were shown off during the announcement basically put that to it. It was marketed in a similar way as 30k is to 40k, so we all pretty much expect it to be Forge World. Now, there is a bit of an issue here, as Forge World is primarily resin, and resin is not very easy to work with. Yes, they're trying to push Warhammer The Old World as one of those specialist games, which is why it's going to Forge World, but yeah, resin's not fun to play with, and I know this from experience. I have a few models from all the different lines on the Forge World website. The miniatures need to be, or at least the grand majority of the miniatures need to be plastic, because, well, let's be very honest, resin's not easy to work with, as I said, but plastic is. You can strip down the miniatures if you make mistakes or you want to change color palettes and so on, whereas resin, yeah, you can pretty much damage the miniature beyond repair. Resin miniatures themselves don't really have a lot of different customability options. You can't really do too much with them, and yeah, sometimes some of them will come with a different weapon or two, but that's pretty much it. That's understandable for 30k, where everything was pretty much very streamlined, but Warhammer Fantasy is pretty much like 40k. Even Age of Sigmar too. Customability works out very well, not just for kit bashing, but trying out different loadouts and so on. You can't really do that too well with resin. I've tried magnetizing too, and yeah, it doesn't work out too well in some cases because the resin itself is pretty brittle. Sometimes there can be issues where you will need to bend the weapon into place because it will come warped or just broken on arrival, and yeah, let's be honest, nobody wants that, especially first-time Warhammer players. A lot of people who were introduced to Warhammer through Total War are going to want to jump into Warhammer The Old World, and it's not going to be an experience they're going to like. I mean, I'll be very, very honest with you, even though I'm a long-standing Warhammer Fantasy player, I even shot at the idea of resin miniatures, because yeah, a whole army like that where you're going to have to green stuff any imperfections or bend stuff back into place, that doesn't sound like fun. I want to build up my dudes and get them onto the table as fast as possible so I can actually play a game. But let's move on to our second yet related point, cost of entry. Yep, this is going to be a fun conversation. So Forge World has been known to be, well, let's just be very honest here, expensive. It's the main reason why you will not generally see a lot of Forge World stuff with 40k or Age of Sigmar players unless they're very highly competitive, as, let's be honest once again, Forge World stuff is a little bit overpowered in most cases. The issue is that Warhammer Fantasy players are going to be returning Old Guard. Some of them might have quit when the end times happened, and some of them have moved on to 40k or Age of Sigmar, so the Forge World prices could put a lot of people off. Not only that, but it has to be taken into account that a lot of Warhammer Fantasy hype is because of Total War Warhammer, and a lot of those players might be interested in trying out the setting, as many of them would like to try out Warhammer Fantasy, even if it is Warhammer The Old World, a new type of experience. The typical Forge World price range might be quite brutal on them, unless, of course, it's just brought down a little bit. The perfect example would be a box of Kriegsmen, which is, what, £46 for 10 Guardsmen? Whereas if you look at a 10-man unit of Dark Elf Dark Shards, or Elf, if you're looking at Age of Sigmar, it's £22.50 for 10 models. So if Old World stays at a decent price range, more in line of, say for example, Age of Sigmar or Warhammer 40,000, then it's more likely to attract more players. Because, look, a lot of these Total War players themselves are PC gamers. They can just shelve out £60 on a new game or whatever, and they're entertained for months, sometimes even years. I mean, look, Total War Warhammer 2, 4 years, and yeah, still not bored of it. But an army itself is not cheap, and Forge World prices is not gonna bring people in. I'm just saying this very, very honestly, as I want people to play. This is the return of Warhammer Fantasy. I want this to be successful. Which leads us to our next point. There's going to be a lot of use of old minis. We're allowed to use our old miniatures when the rulebook or whatever drops. And you know what? We should have some Age of Sigmar miniatures being able to be used. Some stuff that fits with the theme of Warhammer Fantasy, like say for example, the Chaos Blood Warriors, the Hedonites of Slaanesh. All of those fit with the theme, and that stuff is what's going to get people interested and could potentially get them to try out Age of Sigmar too. It's something very, very important because cross-promotion obviously does work, and yeah, look, they're pretty. Why not have them being able to be used in both? Compatibility between systems works out pretty well. You have to look at 30k and 40k. It does work out with certain like Contemptor Dreadnoughts and so on, but if there was much more, which is much easier to do with Age of Sigmar and Fantasy, because of course it's the same setting and there's not too much of a drastic change. Whilst Age of Sigmar has evolved the timeline and so on, a lot of stuff stays the same. Whereas of course 30k and 40k have the same timeline but 10,000 years into the future with loads of technological marvels and so on. It's much harder to do for a sci-fi setting than it is for a fantasy one. Also, let's just address the fact that a large majority of the Age of Sigmar model range is still Warhammer Fantasy stuff. These are all Warhammer Fantasy models that got transferred over to the new setting. They've held up pretty well, and if they're going to be used in Age of Sigmar, why can't they be used in Warhammer The Old World? It's just simple. But let's move on to our next topic, which is point of entry. You see, one thing that Age of Sigmar and Warhammer 40k do really, really well is they have a bunch of different minigames. This is of course Warcry, Underworlds, Kill Team, anything like that. Warhammer Fantasy used to have a game like that known as Mordheim, which we might be very close to in the timeline for Warhammer The Old World, depending on where exactly we start. And let's be completely honest, many of us don't really care too much about a timeline. They could even have this as a minigame which is set a few hundred years in the future or whatever, you know? The idea is just to have a point of entry for the hobby where it's not that expensive. This is the great thing about Warcry, Underworlds, and all these other minigames, because you can get those miniatures, you can enjoy using them, you can learn the system or something very similar to the system, and then if you feel like really committing, buy a full army. Let's also take into account the fact that Mordheim is still incredibly popular. Like, there's a lot of active groups worldwide still playing Mordheim, and yeah, it's because it's very competitive and it's really, really fun. Low cost of entry, and there's just so much about it. It would be amazing if Mordheim saw a eventual return into the official scene, as it could do with a new facelift and just be brought up to a more modern standard. Plus, like I said, it's a great entry point for new hobbyists, especially those more interested in Warhammer Fantasy. And for our final topic, I'd say it's the most important, yet I'd say that everything that I've mentioned so far is fairly important. Though we do need to talk about regular updates. The thing is, Warhammer 40k gets the most updates, and yes, that's pretty much because it's the big ticket item, it's what makes the most money, it's most profitable, it's understandable. The issue is there that some of the systems do kinda suffer for it, just being very honest here. I mean, Age of Sigmar is slow, but it's still getting updated on a regular basis. 30k, I don't know when they've last received an update. They get a new model every now and then, but yeah, it's not really sustainable, is it? Balancing is very important, which is why we need this to be done with Warhammer The Old World, especially if they are going to say that there's going to be all the armies that we've seen in 8th edition and maybe some in the previous editions, and then, you know, Cafe and anything else that may show up in Total War Warhammer 3. Balance is not commonly seen in a Warhammer game, I'll be very honest about that, but trying to keep it as balanced as possible would very much help. A regular FAQ update and so on would be absolutely fantastic, so nothing really breaks. Believe me, I play 8th edition Skaven competitively, and yeah, that edition was fantastic. It made the Skaven pretty much almost unbeatable, so yeah, you know, if a FAQ update does come into effect, it would stop people like myself and many other gamers, because there's a lot of us by the way, from basically abusing any loophole in the rules. It will also keep players more interested because, yeah, let's be honest, let's look at, say, for example, the Tomb Kings in 8th edition, one of the worst armies in the whole edition. Nobody pretty much wanted to play them because, yeah, at a certain point, you wouldn't just win anymore. You just constantly lose. Balancing is very important, and to my understanding, Games Workshop normally reach out to YouTubers and content creators such as Twitch streamers and so on, who know the series and, yeah, play it. And the thing is, my concern is, because it does happen in 40k, I'll be very honest there, where just stuff is broken at launch. The Space Marines at the beginning of 9th edition, well, that was absolutely brutal. And yeah, you know, I don't know who tested that, but it just happens. I want to see Warhammer Fantasy dedicated YouTubers, streamers, and so on. They're the ones that should be playtesting the whatever we're going to call it. I'm assuming army books like the old days. They should be testing the army books because those are the ones that know it. I want to be perfectly clear here. This is not any disrespect to any Age of Sigmar or Warhammer 40k playtesters, but the game itself is supposed to be a mix of 3rd edition all the way up to 8th edition for Warhammer Fantasy. So people who know that system should be the ones who to playtest it. And I'm not saying myself, though I would love to, by the way, so just putting my name out there. But you know what I mean. And I think the player base could agree with all the points that I've been bringing up in this video. Though if you guys have any other suggestions, leave them in the comments below. Hopefully Games Workshop check out the Old World speculation videos of different YouTubers and so on, as they might be hopefully looking for feedback. Well, at this point, suggestions, not feedback, but you get what I mean. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below, guys, and let's start a bit of a discussion. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms, such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games, where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.